Kelvin Sampson, Milos Uzan, and the refs helped Houston secure themselves a trip to the Elite Eight.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Elite Eight and welcome in to the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every single day. We are here with you live on Friday evening, Saturday for basically everybody outside of the West Coast, as we record this here at the finale of the Sweet 16 games on Friday, joined, of course, by our co-host, Isaac Schade. Isaac, really fun slate of games, but also just the chalkiest possible results that we could have gotten here as we now have the Elite Eight officially set. I want to thank all of you folks of all. Want to thank all of you who are live with us on Friday evening, as well as those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord, those of you who are everyday listeners, and remind you all that today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. And if you need one now, you can grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today to stay energized. Isaac, we need those right now as we are up late again with our Elite Eight officially set. And like we said, all 4 1 seeds. We got 3 2 seeds. We got 1 3 seed. It is as chalky as you're going to get. We saw some really fun games. Michigan State had a very narrow win over a tough Chris Beard Ole Miss team. And then we got Houston's win over Purdue. There was some controversy. There was some questionable no calls. There was a lot of chaos at the end of that game. And that's where we want to start, Isaac, because it really felt like the main storyline today was going to be the Michigan State Ole Miss game, maybe the amount of SEC teams in the Elite Eight, which we are going to talk about both of those things. But as we were kind of discussing, like, hey, how do we want to approach the show? How do we want to talk about this? All of a sudden, Purdue got really close to Houston. We were like, well, I think we should kind of let this game play out because it looked like it had a chance to potentially go into overtime. But for Houston, they're able to get the win here with an incredible blob baseline out of bounds play in the final seconds. Milos Uzan inbounds the ball. I can't remember which big it was. Catches it, immediately passes it back to Uzan as he steps onto the floor. He gets a little lay-in with 0.9 seconds left. That's the difference maker as Houston advances past Purdue. But Isaac, let's start the conversation, not just with the overall win. I do want to talk about what this means for Houston and what it means for a Purdue team that many folks didn't even think were going to be here and yet nearly put themselves in the Elite Eight. But I want to talk about the officiating because, and I'll set it up here quickly, we had 2 out-of-bounds calls that went in favor of Houston that should not have gone in favor of Houston. One of them was immediately a turnover that Purdue got the ball back. The other one was an LJ Cryer 3, his only made 3 of the game, mind you. And then we had Uzan on that final possession, what appeared to push off Braden Smith before taking a mid-range jumper. Now, he didn't make the mid-range jumper, but Houston attempted to tip the ball in, and then the ball went out of bounds. That's where they got that out of bounds and were able to run that blob play. It sure looked like an offensive foul to me. That plus the officiating on those out of bounds calls kind of led to Houston's final 5 points in this game. What were your thoughts on that?
2 things before I say that. Number one, I appreciate how choked up you got when you were acknowledging everybody here with us, Andy. Just really finding the words that you needed to say. I'm glad you figured out.
It's just so emotional, right?
I know. I'm glad you figured out English. Secondly, I'm glad we didn't get overtime for a second night in a row in the last game, or we might have needed about 5 more of those 5 Hour Energy shots.
The English would have been so much worse.
I can't speak good English stuff. And then thirdly, How could you not remember that it was JoJo Tugler and those magnificent sideburns?
Yes, you're right.
Dude, those mutton chops are glorious.
Yes. They stand out.
Is he living in the set? What is this? Phi Slamma Jamma? Is it the, wrong Houston era, bro? Like, come on. I know it's great. Tugler, great what a play by Kelvin Sampson. Anyway, Andy, I was reminded on Twitter actually, because I posted about what I thought were those calls. I had forgotten in the first half, there was and I had tweeted about this and forgot. Somebody reminded me, like, Isaac, you literally talked about this. There was an egregious basket interference call that should have gone against Purdue that was not called. I mean, it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
And then there was an out of bounds call that went against Houston that was also not close in the first half. So, I mean, this was the whole game. It felt like, Andy, With those 3 calls, though, down the stretch, obviously we're going to remember them in bolder relief because they were as this game got close and it was down the stretch. The first 2 out of bounds calls, there was no subjectivity to them at all. Like it was clear and definitive that those were out of bounds off of Houston. Unfortunately, it was outside of the time at which you can go to the monitor and review. Or perhaps fortunately, because we didn't have more reviews that way, but it's so like, it's almost as random as the quad system. Like, okay, we're going to spend 80 minutes over at the monitor for these things later, but because we're outside of this threshold, we can't go get the call right. Like, it's just, anyway, like we need a quick review system in New York calling in, buzzing them and saying, look, that's clearly off Houston, flip it, right? Like that's not hard. Now with the push off, at the end, there is subjectivity to there. Like, let's recognize that, right? I think that you and I both felt like Braden Smith was upright in legal guarding position. And anytime, like literally by definition, when you see the elbow, the forearm extended, it's going to get called. And it just wasn't here. And I think where you and I typically differ is I'm a little bit more of a don't swallow your whistle, like make the same calls. I think you're more of a swallow your whistle a little bit more down the end of the game. But this one, I think we could both agree, like when you've got that much of a push off that displaces Braden Smith that far, you just simply got to call. Like if that shot from Uzan had gone down, oh, Andy, that would have been bad. Very, very bad. Worse than it was. It's already a tough, bitter pill to swallow. As you said, those 3 calls directly led to Houston's final 5 points of this basketball game.
Yeah, and again, I agree with everything that you're saying, but if that shot had gone down, I think the conversation, the tone would be a little bit different. It would feel much more direct of like, Purdue didn't get this call, Houston scored, they lost, Purdue lost. That like it would be bam, bam, bam. That would be the storyline. But in this case, Purdue didn't get the call, Houston missed the shot. And then Purdue failed to get the rebound. And then when the ball went out of bounds, Purdue failed to defend Milos Uzan coming onto the floor and getting that lay-in. That doesn't mean that the foul not being called wasn't still egregious, and it doesn't mean that Purdue fans shouldn't still be frustrated or upset about it. I get all of that. But as a coach, like you still didn't execute. Like Matt Painter, I'm sure he would say that, like, we still could have grabbed that defensive rebound. We still could have prevented Uzan from getting that easy shot at the rim. Like, and then like more big picture, we shot under 30% from 3 in this game. We shot barely 40% from the field. Fletcher Lawyer and Trey Kaufman-Renn combined for half of our team's points, 30 out of 60. Like Braden Smith had 15 assists. He had a great game. He only had 7 points. Like at the end of the day, Purdue didn't execute enough to win this basketball game. And that's a credit to Houston for, getting over the hump, getting back into the Elite Eight after last year's loss to Duke and dealing with the injuries that they've been dealing with. But I think it's also important to acknowledge nobody expected this from Purdue. Like it sucks right now. It hurts for that fan base. I'm sure that they're feeling it, but this is a team that most people didn't. A lot of people had them losing to High Point, and then a lot more people had them losing to either Clemson or McNeese in the second round. And here they were, literally possession away from being back in the Elite Eight in the post-Zach Edey era. That is a tremendous accomplishment for this team. It hurts right now, but they lost to an incredibly good Houston team who has a very real chance of taking this whole thing home.
And on the Houston of it, the fact that they did that with LJ Cryer going 2 of 13 with 5 total points is wild to me, Andy, because if I had asked you pregame, all right, Mr. AP Patton, our guy LJ Cryer, he's going to score 5 total points in this game, 1 of 3 of those points of which coming in the final minute in the final minutes of the game. I don't think we would think we'd be sitting here talking about a Houston victory right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you told me that and that none of their bigs scored in double figures, I definitely wouldn't think that they would have gotten the W over Purdue. But again, Uzan had a great game. Emmanuel Sharp scored 17, and they didn't score very many points, but they scored 2 more than Purdue. That's all I needed to do to get a W.
Andy, you talked about Purdue, and I thought a big part of what allowed them to be so competitive in this game and to fight back was that against Houston, you simply have to match their toughness. You have to match their physicality. You have to match their intensity. And I thought Matt Painter had his guys ready for that. And that was key, that even in the first half, as TKR wasn't able to do much, they were able to stay with this Houston team and really fight and battle.
Yeah, 20. I think the biggest storyline, though, while I agree, was the offensive rebounding was just too much for Houston. Not only to get that tip on the final possession, but they ended up having 20 second chance points compared to just 9 for Purdue. So I think that was a huge storyline in this game. Purdue absolutely matched their physicality in a way that very few teams have been able to do. But when it came down to it at the end, they just weren't quite able to get over that hump. Still, again, tremendous season from Purdue. But this Houston team has battled through adversity throughout the season. They've continued to battle when teams come back on them the way that Gonzaga did, the way Purdue did. They find ways to win those games. I'm really excited to see what they do against Houston on Sunday.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Houston, Tennessee. That's going to be fun.
Excuse me, yes, against Tennessee, yes.
Well, just like Thursday night, Andy, the bookend games were the most exciting down the stretch. So we turn next from the last game of Friday night to the first game of Friday night, where Sean Padula tried to will Ole Miss to their first ever Elite Eight, but Tom Izzo and Michigan State were a little bit inevitable thanks to a certain freshman that we'll talk about a lot. We're going to break that down coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about our good friends at Nissan. We're all about the stats here at Locked On because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, those numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever it is you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or you're rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. So go ahead right now and take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Andy, the first game of Friday evening was number 2 seed Michigan State against number 6 seed Ole Miss there in the South bracket. Michigan State wins this thing 73-70, courtesy of a buzzer-beating three-pointer from Ole Miss that, oh, by the way, turned this thing into a bad beat because Michigan State was favored by 3.5. Apologies to everyone out there, and very interested to see if this will pop up on Monday evening on a little show we call SVP. Andy, unfortunate for Ole Miss, they're unable to make their first ever Elite Eight. But where I want to start is this story we've talked so much about is Jace Richardson, the freshman at Michigan State, whom Coach Izzo handed the keys to quite a while ago.
Yeah, really tremendous performance. Sorry, go ahead.
No, let me give it a little more setup. Andy, he had come off a game in which he had scored just 6, maybe it was 7 points. I can't remember because I can't find my notes about it. But you'll find it maybe and talk about it.
6 points, 1 of 10.
Yes, 6 points, 1 of 10 in that game. Prior to that, he had a 12-game double-digit scoring streak coming into that. And it was like, oh, man, Jace Richardson kind of hits this wall in the second round, but they still win. Can he get back? And, oh, boy, Andy, did he get back?
Yeah.
Now it's your turn. Go.
To come back from a struggling performance in the NCAA tournament as a freshman, you're feeling all this pressure. You know, you have this legacy to live up to with your dad. Like, I can't imagine what all was going through Jace Richardson's head coming into this game against a really tough, physical Ole Miss team, a team that is going to make it hard for you to get your buckets, to get to your spots. And Richardson comes in completely cool under pressure, does not seem to be impacted by the weight of what's going on in this moment and the opponent that he's playing. Goes out, drops 20 points, 6 of 8 shooting for Richardson in this game. He was 4 of 6 from 3. He was also 4 of 6 from the line. He had 6 rebounds as well. I think Michigan State, without him, I think they were 2 of 17 or 2 of 11 from 3. Michigan State, as a team, terrible from the 3-point line in this game, but Jace Richardson kept them alive, knocked down 4 threes. He was incredibly critical in this game. Again, the stat line, especially coming off a day on Thursday where we had 4 guys score 30-plus points. We had Saunders had 25, Queen had 27. We had all these huge monster scoring performances. Today, not quite as many of those like big-time scoring games because most of these games were much more low scoring, but I thought what Jace Richardson did in this game for Michigan State, again, against a really tough Ole Miss team, was as good or better than some of the, maybe not as good as Mark Sears dropping 10 threes, but like one of the best individual performances, especially considering the circumstances and his age and everything. Really good stuff from him.
And Andy, when you look at some of the like particulars of this game, it's like, how did Michigan State win this thing? That Sparty wins despite having fewer rebounds, more turnovers. Like the steals were 8-1 in favor of Ole Miss when it was all said and done. Less field goals. They literally never led in this game until 51-50 with 7 minutes and 50 seconds to go. And then it was basically back and forth the rest of the way down the stretch. And Andy, we said it's in the tease for this segment, but Schade Padula has just been an absolute dude for Chris Beard. We saw glimpses of that at Virginia Tech, but with all due respect to Coach Mike over there, like Virginia Tech just hasn't been that good, which is crazy because they had him and Hunter Couture and it was a whole thing. But gosh, Schade Padula has really, really done well for what is as a reminder, guys, a balanced team that has 6 double-digit scores, but Padula was really trying to will this team to victory, and he hit big shot after big shot, big defensive play after big defensive play. Just a great basketball game down the stretch.
Yeah, really liked what Padula brought for this game. He had a key offensive rebound late in the game, very late in the game. He had a couple clutch mid-range shots, just controlled the game in a way that, that was so important for Ole Miss in this game. Again, the balance for this team has been a big storyline all season. And in this game, it was fine. He had 24. They got 13 from Morrell. They got 11 from Dia. They got 9 from Brakefield off the bench. Again, in a more low-scoring game. But Padula really needed to put this team on his back towards the end of the game. And when Michigan State came back, again, to your point, they didn't lead until the under 8 media timeout in the second half. They didn't lead this game to like 7:50, I think was the mark for Michigan State. So Ole Miss had a lead most of this game. And when Michigan State was able to come back, Schade Padula and Ole Miss were able to kind of counterpunch and stay in it. I feel for this program, this was their best opportunity to make the Elite Eight for the first time. But, if you feel confident that Chris Beard's sticking around, which at this point there's no indication he's not, you got to feel pretty darn good about the direction of your program because he was able to do this very early in his tenure at Ole Miss. They got money. They got players want to play for him. Like, this is not the last time we're going to see Ole Miss contending for their first Elite Eight. I think it's going to happen in the very near future, assuming Chris Beard stays with the Rebels.
Andy, I'll just remind you, this was year 2 of Chris Beard at Ole Miss. It was year 3 in Lubbock, Texas, when they went to the national championship game. So, great days ahead, I do believe, for them. Andy, let me give one critique of Schade Padula. There's 26 seconds left in this game. It had gotten to the point where they go up. Michigan State does by 4. And Padula settles for the 3. I thought that was the moment where you're still going for 2. Go for 2, get the bucket. They're not going to foul you. Then you foul it and see what you can do. And it's just like you got to stay doing the things that don't end the game, right? Like that basically ended the game. I know they ultimately get the ball back and he scores after Brakefield's missed dunk, which was good grief, crazy. But anyway, that's how it ended. Great stuff. Great season, as you said, for Ole Miss. I know they're going to be proud of their efforts. I know our guy Stephen Willis is probably sad tonight, the great host of Locked On Ole Miss. I can only imagine how much yelling and screaming Matt Sheehan has done this evening as Spartans are on to Elite Eight. Andy, speaking of that Elite Eight, we have what is tied for the chalkiest Elite Eight ever. The seed aggregate, where you just add together all the seeds of the Elite Eight, is 13. That matches the seed aggregate from 2007, which is tied with this year for the lowest Elite Eight aggregate we've ever had. 4 1s, 3 2s, and a 3. Andy, tell us about it.
Yeah, just insane to have had. We talked about, go upsets early, chalk late, and we saw that this year with not as many upsets as we typically see. We saw Colorado State, we saw Drake, we saw a few other 10 seeds pull upsets. We saw Arkansas make a run to the Sweet 16. But at the end of the day, here we are looking at the Elite Eight, and with the exception of St. John's, it is the top seeded teams in the country. And Texas Tech, I think certainly now you make the argument they're the best 3 seed, but I think you could have made that argument before the tournament as well. So this is pretty clear. I think Ken Pom, these are all top 10 teams, except for like Gonzaga is the only top 9 team that's not in the Elite Eight. Like, it's just crazy how dominant these programs have been all year long. And it shouldn't be a surprise. 4 of these teams come from the SEC. You have 4 SEC teams in the Elite Eight. This ties a record set by the ACC in 2016 and the Big East in 2009 is the last time that this happened. But this is the first time. So we have all 4 of these teams in the Elite Eight, but this is the first time they're all in different regions, meaning there is a possibility that we could have all 4 of these teams in the Final Four It would be Auburn as the 1 seed, or Auburn and Florida as the 1 seeds, and then of course Bama and Tennessee as the 2 seeds. And they're going to be not favored in their games necessarily, as Bama will take on Duke and Tennessee will take on Houston. But those are 2 teams, Isaac, that we talked about at length this year being very strong consideration to be 1 seeds, at times to be the number 1 overall seed in the case of Tennessee, and even Bama to an extent. So sure, they're 2 seeds, but there's a very real chance. There's a very real chance that we have 4 SEC teams in the Final Four. It's going to break a lot of people's brains. People aren't going to be thrilled about it if it happens. And I don't think I wouldn't bet on it happening necessarily, but the fact that it's even a possibility is complete insanity.
Andy, I'll say 2 things in response. You'll recall at one point before Selection Sunday, that weekend, I said the actual Final Four is probably going to be a less stacked thing than the SEC tournament Final Four. Well, it could be an SEC tournament Final Four.
It'd be the same.
The other thing that occurred to me as you were mentioning the other 2 years where half of the Elite Eight was dominated by one conference. Say them again just to make sure I got it right.
The ACC in 2016 and the Big East in 2009.
Okay. Do you remember who won the championships in either of those years?
2016.
There was a very big shot that was made at the buzzer.
Yes, it was the Carolina game, right?
Yes, Villanova and Chris Jenkins
Carolina,
won that championship. And then the 2009 one, North Carolina beat Michigan State in that championship. So Andy, both years that half the Elite Eight was occupied by a conference, that conference did not win the national championship. Just interesting. And worth noting, that doesn't mean it's going to happen that way again, but it is what it is. Andy, take us on.
Well, I would point out that North Carolina is not in the Final Four either, which apparently is a through line for the other 2 times that this happened. So Isaac, Ole Miss could not get a fifth team from the SEC into the Elite Eight. They came so close to doing it, but we do want to talk about the other games, the wins for the SEC, Auburn and Tennessee, both securing W's, although Tennessee would have been an SEC team regardless as they beat Kentucky to get here. We're going to talk about those 2 games to close out the show coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, daylight savings times, it snuck up on us again. And here we are in late March, recording late for the 35th day in a row. And if you're like us, you're here on the show with us, you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, you're feeling what the madness has done to us all, then 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine may mean more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching NCAA tournament games, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Isaac and I have been up late every single day this month, and I tell you what, we absolutely need that jolt we get from 5 Hour Energies. Whether I'm at the game, whether we're out in Dallas, whether we're just traveling, 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab, and it helps keep me feeling refreshed. So head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 different flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12 or 24 pack delivered right to your door. And if you need one now, grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are literally everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, Isaac, let's talk about these 2 other games that we got on Friday night. The 2-seed Tennessee Vols taking down the 3-seeded Kentucky Wildcats. We'll talk about that, as well as Auburn's win over Michigan. Looks like a 13-point win for those of you who didn't watch the game. It was quite a bit closer than that for most of the contest, but let's start with the SEC versus SEC battle. Tennessee had lost to Kentucky both times they played them previously. It was a big storyline coming into this game. I know this phrase is ringing in our good friend Locked On Kentucky host Lance Dawes' ears right now. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in the same year. You hear that repeated over and over and over and over again. And unfortunately, in Kentucky's case, they were unable to secure a 3rd straight win over Tennessee. Rick Barnes and the Vols advancing to the Elite Eight with a chance to get that huge monkey off their program's back and potentially finally make it to a Final Four this year.
And you know, it's funny. It just now occurred to me as we're talking about these games. They were the exact same score, 78-65.
Oh, weird. I didn't even realize that.
It's the craziest thing. I think something's rigged. That's somebody out there. Anytime you say anything now, it's rigged. I tell you. Andy, what was so impressive to me about what Tennessee did in this basketball game is that they got out to this lead And then the second half, they just managed it.
Yeah.
It stayed like basically the entire I think legitimately the entire second half stayed between 12 to 18 points. That was the spread the entire second half. Tennessee took a lead and then just said, that's it. That's the ball game. We're just going to manage it, control it, and just beat you. And I mean, it was close. A lot of the numbers are close. Both teams shot right at 50% for the game. Kentucky was technically 49%, but we'll round up, right? And it's just two strong basketball teams going at it, but Tennessee having the better of it and controlling this game by double digits. And look, we'll talk about what that means for Mark Pope and all that. What a great first year. But Andy, I undersold Tennessee coming into this tournament. They have been really impressive to me. And, I don't want to get too far out ahead here, but they're going to have something for Houston on Sunday afternoon. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah, we'll see if Houston can continue to survive incredibly close games, which they've done in their last two against Gonzaga and, of course, Purdue, the game we talked about earlier in the show. But yeah, Tennessee's they're going to be an absolute load for Houston to handle. And in this game, they shoot 5 of 19 from three, 26% from three against Kentucky and their high octane offense. And yet Tennessee rolls to a victory here pretty comfortably. 14 offensive rebounds, doubled up Kentucky on the offensive glass. That was a huge part of this game. They had 10 more total rebounds, again, 7 more offensive rebounds. I think that really tells a big story here. They also only turned the ball over 8 times compared to 12 turnovers for Kentucky. Zakai Ziegler was excellent in this game, 18 points, 10 assists. Not a super efficient scoring game, but doesn't matter. He was so impactful on both ends of the floor for this team. And I think, too, for this team, for Tennessee, like, they had 3 guards over 15 points in this one. You had Ziegler with 18. You had Chaz Lanier had 17. He only shot 1 of 6 from 3, but he was really effective at getting to the rim. And then Jordan Gainey comes off the bench and drops 16. I just think that the depth for this Tennessee team to have a good game despite not shooting well from 3 and despite not getting a ton of offensive production from your front court, typically you need at least one of those two things. And Tennessee's defense was good enough for them to get a W without it.
And you look at Otega Owe's line for the game and you're like, oh, he did fine, 5 of 12. That was okay. The problem was in the first half when it mattered, Otega Owe and Kobe Brea were a combined 3 of 10. And there was a while there where it was like 1 of 8. And then I think Owe hit his last 2 shots of the first half. And by the time Owe was able to get going in the second half, it was over, ball game, and it didn't matter. And so it's just tough when those guys that have been doing it, Brea had 23 the other night, and it's just they needed them to show up. And unfortunately, this Kentucky squad has been shorthanded. I know Lamont Butler was able to play again, which is great, and that makes me happy. But just the wrong time for those guys to not have great first halves. And again, Tennessee shut the water off, and it was over.
Yeah, 6 points from their bench too, and one of them was a 3-pointer from Colin Chandler that was basically garbage time. So yeah, that doesn't help to not get production there either.
But Andy, what I do want to make sure to say, and obviously we'll unpack this a lot more this offseason, but what a first year for Mark Pope, man. Like thinking back to all the wringing of hands and consternation when he was first hired, Big Blue Nation has their man. Like, I believe that this is the dude for the job, and they're in great shape for years to come.
Yeah, and it's a good segue here because Kentucky's in great shape with Mark Pope, and I think it's pretty clear that Michigan's in awesome shape with Dusty May as well. A tremendous first season for Dusty May in Michigan. They fall short against Auburn here, and they put up a heck of a fight in the second half of this game. They made it interesting. They limited Janai Broome in the second half. Yeah, you're going to look at his stat line here and see 22 points, 16 boards, and be like, how the heck was that limited? He did most of his damage in the first half. He was a lot quieter in the second half. He had about a 9-minute stretch where he didn't score at all in the second half, but Auburn was able to go to different guys, played really well defensively in this game, shut down Vlad Golden significantly. Danny Wolf had a great first half, a great start to the second half, and then he didn't score for the final 13 minutes of this game as Auburn just put the absolute clamps on the Wolverines to get a big-time victory and continue their quest to get back to the Final Four and potentially get a national championship.
Andy, very quickly, this game turned. Like, Michigan looked like they were starting to take control. They were up 9 at 48-39, and from that point, Auburn goes on a 31-8 run, Mr. Patton, to make it 70-56. and it was over. They just started doing stuff. And you know who it was? It was our guy, TOUGH Purdue.
Yeah.
He's so freaking good. He steps up and shows out again and again and again in the biggest moments. Chad Baker-Mazara, we worried about his health. Seems like he was okay-ish, but a little bit shaken up still. Andy, let's remind everyone of Saturday's tip times. Today we start with Texas Tech, the lone team outside the top 2 seeds, taking on Florida, 6:09 Eastern, Gators -6.5, followed by Alabama Duke. Oh my word, buckle up. We will be live right after that. 8:49 approximately Eastern. Both of those games on TBS. No line yet for some reason on that one from our friends at FanDuel. And then the Sunday tip times, always earlier in the day on Elite 8 Sunday. These games will both be on CBS. Houston, Tennessee, 1-2, 2:20 Eastern, Houston -3.5, followed by Auburn, Michigan State, 1-2, 5:05 Eastern, Auburn by 5.5. Andy, this is a loaded, chalky, great weekend of basketball. Let's go. So many great players, so many great teams. It's going to be phenomenal. Thank you all for tuning in with us on a late Friday night. It is now Saturday in 3 of our 4 time zones in the continental lower 48 states. Andy, with you being the lone exception there. Thank you all so much for being here. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Yeah, you know, it was a good individual night, but you lost. Let's go Wild Popes, better days ahead. And cheers to McBruins, who he's pretty happy today. Shouts to Donovan Dent. All right, guys, we'll be back with you tomorrow night live after things. We're going to have to go quick because we got an early wake-up call Sunday morning. But until then, peace.